let's talk about Marvel Comics' biggest mistake, Sabra, and her appearance in Captain America Brave New World. Now first, some comic book story context. She first appeared in a Hulk comic in 1981, The Incredible Hulk, befriends a small Palestinian boy who informs him of the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Sometimes it is very hard to be an Arab in Israel, he says. Both my people and Israelis say that this land is theirs. They could share it, but two very old books tell them that they must kill each other over it, Sahad tells the Hulk. An attack by hooded men results in Sahad dying. Sabra appears to fight the Hulk, assuming he is aided in the attack, and is met with grief over his friend. The Hulk explains, "Boy died because boy's people and yours both want to own land. Boy died because you wouldn't share." Hulk rages at Sabra. Hulk came looking for peace, but there is no peace here. Sabra is left with confusion as she is left to look upon the body of Sahad. For an instant, Sabra prepares to give chase. She is, after all, an Israeli super agent, a soldier, a weapon of war. But she is also a woman, capable of feeling and capable of caring. It has taken the Hulk to make her see this dead Arab boy as a human being, the comic reads. It has taken a monster to awaken her own sense of humanity. Sabra is described as neither a villain nor anti-hero by Aaron Humphrey, a digital and media studies lecturer at University of Adelaide. He describes her as an antagonist who must struggle and question with the complexities of her nationalism. But I would argue that she is much worse than that. She is worse than a villain, worse than an antagonist or an anti-hero, and very rarely, this is a rare moment where she momentarily questions her loyalty to Zionism and to Israel. So, she was originally envisioned as an Israeli counterpart to Captain America, in the way Steve Rogers, as Captain America, has a counterpart with Red Guardian, who is the Russian counterpart. Sabra possesses superhuman abilities due to her mutant heritage, including superhuman strength, speed, agility, reflexes, endurance, and stamina. Her mutant ability allows her to transfer her powers, determined randomly, and life force with others. She can withstand high-fire impacts, including that of pistol-caliber rifle, and can heal and regenerate faster and more extensively than a regular human being. Now, what we should know about her name is that she was introduced in 1981, a year before the Sabra-Shatila Massacre occurred, which we're going to talk about later in the video. But most characters would experience some sort of name change if their name was immediately identified with a massacre, a genocide, a tragedy. But in Hebrew, the term Sabra means a Jewish person born in Israel. It also refers to a native bush that bears prickly fruit and is soft on the inside. So, the Sabra-Shatila Massacre obviously occurs a year later. Why is there no name change? She's rarely featured in Marvel Comics, and she made more appearances later with the X-Men. But she's a character that's been incredibly controversial and rarely used because she is literally one of the most unpopular Marvel characters and is not identified as an interesting hero or a villain or someone with deep complexities. She's just someone who lives to represent Israel's stance for genocide, cruelty, and not being able to see Arabs as human beings. So, let's take a look at some controversial name changes, because if there is a Sabra-Shatila Massacre, then why not change the name? Well, let's look at other popular culture characters that have changed names. Jesse McCree, the cowboy from Overwatch, was renamed Cole Cassidy after the Blizzard developer of the same name later was charged with sexual harassment allegations. The Foreman character in the NES video game Wrecking Crew was renamed from which is a slur, to Spike in games and the Super Mario Brothers movie as well. ISIS, the name of the spy agency that Archer works for in the TV show Archer, the cartoon. But when the terrorist group ISIS grew into prominence, the show decided to dissolve the agency and never use that name again. The video game Smite also has the Egyptian goddess Isis as a playable character and was renamed to Esset, one of the alternate spellings of her name. Apu of The Simpsons was removed from the show after years of harmful racial stereotypes that were considered offensive to Indians. Pepe Le Pew was even removed from cartoons after years of misogynist sexual advances, being sort of a creep and overly aggressive in a romantic manner. Things age. We progress with time. Shiva is a character in Marvel Comics that was featured as a main antagonist in the X-Men 90s animated series episode Weapon X, Lies and Videotape. She was renamed to Talos so as not to disrespect Hindu beliefs. So it wouldn't be popular to have Shiva serve as a villain in comic books when, Shiva is a Hindu goddess and deserves, at least a certain amount of respect, right? Now, also, the first trailer for Sam Raimi's Spider-Man in 2002 featured an incredible-looking sequence where Spidey foils a robbery by trapping a helicopter between the twin towers of the World Trade Center. The trailer had the misfortune of premiering in the early summer of 2001, just months before September 11th, 2001's terrorist attack. Raimi later confirmed the sequence was intended for the final film, but was removed after the September 11th attacks. So, as you can see, characters have had their name changed, and if indeed Sabra is so disrespectful to Palestinians and people worldwide, why hasn't the name changed, and why they continue pressing that? So, let's dive in. What is the Sabra-Shatila Massacre? In September of 1982, an Israeli allied militia killed civilians with guns, knives, and axes. The Israeli army surrounded the camps and shelled them, which resulted in thousands of deaths. So that's the cliff notes. But let's dive in deeper. In June 1982, Israel launched a massive invasion of Lebanon. Spearheaded by Defense Minister Ariel Sharon, the notorious hardliner Sharon wanted to destroy the Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO, the internationally recognized representative of the Palestinian people, which was based in Lebanon at the time. The Israeli military advanced all the way to the capital of Beirut, laying siege to and ferociously bombarding the western part of the city, where the PLO was headquartered, and the Palestinian refugee camp of Shatila and the adjacent neighborhood of Sabra are located. Under a ceasefire deal negotiated by the administration of the United States President Ronald Reagan, the PLO evacuated Lebanon by early September with written assurances from the U.S. that hundreds of thousands of Palestinian civilians they were leaving behind would be safe. That proved to be untrue. On September 14th, the leader of Israel's proxy Lebanese militia, the Phalange, was assassinated after being elected president of Lebanon by parliament in a move orchestrated by Sharon and Israel's occupying army. His death was a severe blow to Sharon's plan to install a Christian puppet regime in Lebanon that would do Israel's bidding. The next day, the Israeli military broke the ceasefire agreement, as they always do, and invaded West Beirut, surrounding the Sabra camp and Shatila. On September 16th, the Israeli army sent about 150 Phalangist fighters into Sabra and Shatila, ostensibly to put out any remaining PLO fighters. The Phalange, known for their brutality and history of atrocities against Palestinian civilians, were bitter enemies of the PLO and its Lebanese allies during the Lebanese Civil War. The Phalangists believed wrongly that their leader had been assassinated by a Palestinian. Over the next day and a half, the Phalangists murdered as many as 3,500 people, mostly Palestinians, but also some Lebanese. Most of them women, children, and elderly. Many of the victims were raped and mutilated. Almost immediately after the killing began, Israeli soldiers surrounding Sabra and Shatila became aware that civilians were being murdered but did nothing to stop it. Instead, the Israeli military fired flares into the night sky to illuminate the darkness for the Phalangists, allowing more Phalangist fighters to enter the area on the second day, and supplied bulldozers that were used to dispose of the bodies of many of the victims. The Phalangists finally left Sabra-Shatila on the morning of September 18th, taking many of the surviving men with them for interrogation at a soccer stadium. The interrogations were carried out with Israeli intelligence agents, as you might know, Mossad, who handed many of the captives back to the Phalange. Some of the men returned to the Phalange were later found executed. While the Phalange carried out the massacre, they were an Israeli proxy, armed and funded by Israel. Israel's occupying army was in full control of Sabra and Shatila and sent the Phalangist fighters into the camp, knowing full well of their hatred of the PLO and history of atrocities against Palestinian civilians. In particular, Defense Minister Sharon bore responsibility for the massacre. He planned and initiated Israel's unprovoked invasion of Lebanon, cultivated the Phalange as an Israeli proxy, and did nothing to stop the massacre when told about it, until forced by the Reagan administration. So you can see why not renaming a character named Sabra that consistently reminds Palestinians of this massacre is something incredibly cruel and incredibly dangerous. It is also true that had there been a KKK man who was a superhero and had a burning cross emblazoned on his chest, it would be offensive, and you would either get rid of that character or change them entirely. If there were a character called Auschwitz Man and he had a swastika on his chest, you would realize why that would cause a little bit of upset with Holocaust victims and Jewish people in general. But when it's Palestinian outrage, all of a sudden there's a different scale, and it doesn't matter, right? Well, let's break it up real quick. So, you can check out my gaming channel, Aaron Shack. We celebrate and express the joy and passion of video games on my channel. I play a wide variety of video games. We talk about comic books. We talk about DC and Marvel. We play those video games quite a lot. I play a wide variety of video games. I have a politics channel called Aaron Shack Politics, where we cover aggressively what is going on in Gaza and the West Bank, in Palestine. We talk about world politics. We talk about what's happening here in the United States. So give us a like if you're enjoying the video. Subscribe to both of the channels and check us out sometime. Swing by and tell me that the Sabra video is what brought you here. So, diving deeper into this topic, we need to talk about something very important. Nationalism versus Jingoism. So, patriotism is pride in your country. And when you are patriotic, it's not in a harmful way. When you're patriotic, you sing the national anthem. You put your hand over your heart when you say the Pledge of Allegiance. You fly an American flag outside your house. This could go for any country. It is not harmful to be patriotic. Nothing bad about it. Now, nationalism is when you support your nation no matter what the situation is, resulting in bringing harm to anyone opposing your country. So, we often say that Sabra is indeed a character who is an Israeli nationalist and a Zionist, who supports her nation no matter what, as they commit genocide. They kill men, women, innocent children. No problem, because it's all in the interest of a greater Israel, of fulfilling the promised land, of taking over Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, and the entire Middle East to recreate some sort of classic vision that they have distorted the Torah. They have distorted that. Zionists have distorted the Torah and its teachings in the same way that there are extremist Christians who take Christianity and think that, you know, white nationalism and the Nazi ideology is the way to go, and that's what Jesus wants. That's wrong. That's a distortion of it. And the same thing with extremist Muslims. They take the Quran and they distort what it means. And they believe that the entire world needs to be of their religion or they should die, and that America is the enemy as a result. That's not true. Same with Zionism. They believe that the religion that they are a part of, Judaism, and it's not all Jews, but Zionism is a very succinct group of people. It's a very clear group of people. And they distort Judaism to believe that they have the right to kill people and steal their land, regardless of whether they're rebelling or not, men, women, children, pregnant women, whatever it is. There is no excuse, because they have the greater goal of fulfilling the end times and restoring the promised land to their chosen people. Now, that doesn't include anyone else. They don't like Christians. They don't even like just sort of like regular Jews. If you are not Zionist, you are the enemy. So you see the problem here, where the Israeli nationalism becomes an issue for the entire world. Now, next, we talked about how nationalism versus Jingoism, right? So it also stands to be proven here that Sabra would also be Jingoist. So Jingoism is extreme nationalism with a warlike foreign policy, which we see with Israel, enacting war and genocide to pursue the desires of your country. So like I said, the Zionists want to pursue the ultimate goal of fulfilling the end times and taking the promised land for themselves. And a lot of the Christians in America, there are even Christians that are Zionists that sign up for this. And that's why they immigrate to Israel and they have dual citizenships and stuff like that. So it's pretty wrong. So we need to talk about how Jingoism leads in with Zionism. As I've explained a little bit already, Zionism is the pursuit of an independent Jewish ethno-state. It means no one else is welcome. They don't get along with Arabs, even the ones that are friendly to them. They don't like them. They don't like anyone. They don't like Christians. They don't like anyone, okay? They might tolerate you because America sends the guns if you're visiting, but in general, they are racist. They are prejudiced against various religions, and if you're not with them, you're against them. So Zionists wish to claim all the Middle East for Jews and to bring about the end times. They believe that they are people chosen by God. Now, if you're not convinced already, we need to talk about how Sabra stacks up amongst other Marvel characters. And let's start with some heroes. Captain America is a patriotic character, but as we've talked, he is not a nationalist. Cap will hold his values of how the country should run and hold them accountable for any crimes or wrongdoings. An example would be fighting Hydra when Hydra takes over the American government, when he becomes a fugitive in the process of resisting the Sokovia Accords because they infringed on individual freedom over safety and security. He's good for the sake of being good. He does not have a blind loyalty to his country in the way Sabra does. Now, if we go over to DC Comics, we can take Superman. He is a patriotic character. He's often seen, standing in front of the American flag. His morals are truth, justice, and the American way. And the way Captain America is covered in star-spangled designs. Superman is, red and blue, right? So his alien backstory of Superman is allegorical to the immigrant experience in America to an extent. He upholds his morals to the country and governments around the world, but he will push back and seek justice for any crimes and wrongdoings. He does not blindly stand for America. He is not their soldier. He is not their weapon to be used. And that's what America thought about Captain America. They thought he would blindly fight for them. But he learned over time that, America isn't always right. We're not always the good guys. And like all humans, we are fallible. So the phrase truth, justice, and the American way was changed recently to Truth, Justice, and a Better Tomorrow, which further supports the idea that the American way is not always correct. It doesn't mean we're bad. It just means that we're imperfect, and we strive to do better. As Christians, strive to do better. As Muslims, strive to do better. Everyone has in their religion some semblance of living in peace and doing good for others and helping others, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, healing the sick, right? All of these things. Truth, justice, and a better tomorrow. So Superman will fight cops in the military when they do wrong. It's not unusual. He fought cops during Black Lives Matter sort of protests in the comics, and they were marching, and Superman was with them, and a corrupt cop started provoking fights and thinking that he could get away with it. But Superman stood up for African Americans in the comics. And it's not unusual to see these characters do that. So Cap and Superman both share a common feature where they decline becoming America's weapon and to serve America's interests unquestionably. Now let's talk about anti-heroes, okay? So what is an anti-hero, in case you don't know, right? Like heroes, star-spangled, they're good, they do the right thing. Anti-heroes might do the right thing for the wrong reasons. Or they might do the wrong thing, but with right reasons. Kind of a funny interchange there. But the Punisher is a great example here. So the Punisher is a Marvel character born in vengeance. He's an ex-FBI agent. His family, in most depictions, is often killed via gang warfare. Wife and daughter, wife and son, however they choose to adapt it, are often killed as a result of gang warfare. Sometimes it's the gangs figure out that he was an ex-FBI agent and they decide to seek vengeance by killing his family. Sometimes it's just a random day at the park and it just happens to happen. Okay? So he acts against evil and criminals numerous times by beating up corrupt cops, killing criminals with nothing to lose. He will go further than Captain America and Spider-Man and other heroes to get the results that he deems fit for the crimes he witnesses and learns about. He's morally good, right? He still has that semblance of justice. And it's not that his sense of justice is wrong or skewed in any way. He just believes that because criminals go to jail and then they get out of jail, they serve their time, and then they go back to doing crime, he believes like the system's broken. So I have to be the system. I have to be judge, jury, and executioner, and people will fear me because I either beat them senseless or I kill them, what have you. The Punisher is the ultimate form of vigilante justice. So you can see how at times he may be depicted as a villain in comics. In a Spider-Man comic, he may be an antagonist because Spider-Man does not agree with his way of dishing out justice. Same with Cap, same with other heroes, right? Daredevil. They often go toe-to-toe. But at the end of the day, they are all heroes that can do the right thing for the right reasons. They just have different ways of going about it. So, he's morally good, dishes out punishment depending on the weight of the crime, and ironically has been adapted as an icon and a hero amongst right-wingers, even though he would actually heavily oppose their ideals and values, possibly even beat them up for their own crimes, their own hate crimes. So he despises government corruption. He would despise people like Donald Trump. Donald Trump would be a villain that the Punisher would have to take down his empire and beat him up and leave him handcuffed, outside the police department or something, like the way that right-wingers have just adapted the skull and he's like the ultimate cop or whatever. It's like, no, he stands against corrupt cops. He's against police brutality and everything that the right wing tends to stand for is, law and order party, except for when it's African Americans, all of a sudden it doesn't matter. So the Punisher is ironically not really even a left-wing character. He's just someone who he despises probably the political system as a whole. He sees the corruption of all sides, and he's just there to enforce and to dish out punishment. Now, it wouldn't be a proper video if we didn't also talk about villains, because Sabra needs to be compared to heroes, anti-heroes, and villains. And so the first villain, obviously, is Red Guardian. Red Guardian is a Soviet counterpart for Captain America. He's mostly a nationalist. So some iterations of the character have small redemption arcs of learning his country's faults and becoming a member of the Thunderbolts, leaning into an anti-hero territory, and helps further the contrast with Cap's ideals. So, although he stands apart from Cap, he's kind of like how Deadshot joins the Suicide Squad or something, right? Like, it's how villains like Harley Quinn, who normally align themselves with the Joker, will join the Suicide Squad out of either desperation or because of a greater evil out there. Villains will have to work together to save the entire world, lest it all be doomed, and then no one gets to live. So, no more villains. Loki is a complex and chaotic neutral character. He's a trickster god. He's not a nationalist. He's not patriotic. He's not a jingoist. He's actually the opposite. He is personally motivated. He has no loyalty to anyone. He has temporary loyalty to his brother when it suits his needs. Thor, the god of thunder. Blatant disloyalty to everyone else, at least in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? He is only loyal to Freya, his mother, who truly showed him any care and kindness unconditionally. His type of villainy is evil and world domination, and to cause pesky issues for his brother Thor. Though he may be capable of killing and causing mass chaos, it's mostly for his own gain, whereas Sabra stands so much for Israeli Jingoism and nationalism that she allows her country to do the evils that they do, and to even be a part of it, and be a proud servant of the evil doing that her country does. So she would be quite comparable in some ways to Red Skull. Now, Red Skull is a nationalist character. He is an Obergruppenführer. He's a lieutenant general, what we would say in America, in the Nazi army. He's a confidant of Hitler, a failed super soldier. So he took the same super soldier serum as Cap, but it was like an experimental one, and it didn't work right, so things didn't go well for him. So he's a failed super soldier. He has a constant need for power. And after Hitler dies, he ascends to control and creates the Hydra army that would later hide and embed itself in governments worldwide. He is a different personification and a comic stand-in for Hitler. Because, while the famous issue of Cap punching Hitler is perfect for the time period of World War II and shows, it was a way that, especially comic books of that time, Superman punched Hitler, Cap punches Hitler. There were plenty of comics where they were against the Nazi army. We needed, in America, a form of patriotism in a way, and some forms of that to rally together as a country and to fight in this world war. This war to end all wars is what they considered it at the time. I mean, so many countries were involved in the war and going to war, and our industry had to rally. We had to make things. We had to make food. We had to ration. We had to build the weapons and the planes and the jeeps and the tanks and stuff that would go, across the world to fight. So we needed symbols like that in our pop culture and radio shows and comic books in toys and stuff, right? So, getting back to Red Skull, he's a comic stand-in for Hitler at a certain point, and he aids Hitler in the genocide and mass war crimes. The constant use of Hydra in the comics is often for science experiments used in war, weapons, super soldiers, etc. And he uses that as an ability to gain more power and use Hydra as an organization, an extension of the Nazi beliefs and Hitler's ideals. Literal Nazis. Bad, bad people. Boys and girls, all right? Now, Zionism has a deep comparison with this. It feels like Zionists, after the Holocaust, Zionists learned the tricks that the Nazis used on the Jewish people in the Holocaust. Those horrible things they did. They learned to do those same things when they moved to Palestine. And they started taking over land and beating people and killing people and stealing their land. And that land is not recognized under international law. Those settlements are illegal. So Zionism often compels with fascism. A lot of people will say that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, but is it? You actually have Netanyahu, who is an authoritarian leader, because Arabs and Palestinians do not have the same rights that Israelis do. They can't drive on the same roads. They have to pass through checkpoints. They have different license plates. They have to show their identity, just like in Nazi Germany and all throughout Europe during World War II. Papers, please. You had to show your papers. If the Nazis didn't like something in your papers, or if you look like a Jew, concentration camp for you. And the same thing happens within the state of Israel. So that is a fascist occupational apartheid. And they are committing an active genocide for well over 100 years now. But especially in the past year, we've seen it live under a microscope because everybody has a phone. Everyone has a camera. And there can be no bias, no misreporting, because you're seeing children get shot in the head by Israeli snipers and in the chest. You're seeing parents die in front of their children as a result of Israeli gunfire and bombings. You're seeing ambulance workers and humanitarian aid workers trying to pull children and women and elderly and innocent people out of the rubble. You're seeing mass starvation, deprivation of water, little access to power. Over only 30% of the infrastructure of Gaza still exists, and they're even bombing the West Bank and Lebanon and Syria and destroying their land, bulldozing the roads, just as an act of defiance, even during a ceasefire. So that is not a democracy. Democracies have rules. They play by rules. Now, sometimes they break rules, but an authoritarian government doesn't worry about international law. They don't care about the United Nations, the International Criminal Court, or the ICJ. They don't care about anyone but themselves. And that goes back to Jingoism and nationalism. So, Israel and Zionists have lived long enough to become the villain. Now, Sabra's presence in Captain America Brave New World is controversial. She was met with a great upset from Palestinians and supporters of ending the genocide. Ruth Bat Saraf is the alter ego of Sabra. She is going to appear in the upcoming Marvel Cinematic Universe MCU film Captain America Brave New World in 2025. She's going to be portrayed by an actress, Shira Haas. Now, Shira Haas is actually a former IDF soldier and is obviously a self-professed, heavily Zionist person, in the same way that Gal Gadot is also a Zionist and former IDF soldier. Now, she posed and modeled and stuff because she was pretty, but She also tried to further propaganda after October 7th, 2023. She tried to show an Israeli fascist propaganda film in Los Angeles, and a lot of people didn't go to that showing. And in fact, there were people out there protesting because we were seeing live footage of the genocide. And Gal Gadot and IDF and everyone that's bought and owned by AIPAC or AIPAC, the Israel Political Action Committee, right, were telling us not to believe what our eyes can see. You can't spin genocide. When you go to the Holocaust Museum and you walk through the train cars, you look at the camps, you look at the piles of shoes of dead children, you can't spin that. There's no spinning it. It's real. It's raw. It's incorruptible. And that's the same thing that we're seeing from the streets of Gaza and the West Bank. So, when this was officially announced that Sabra was going to play a role in Captain America, in this fourth installment in the series, Variety reported that Marvel Studios would change her origin to avoid perpetuating harmful stereotypes. My God. A week before the film's theatrical release, Nate Moore, a producer on the film, noted that the character is no longer a mutant or a Mossad agent, which we'll get more into Mossad here in a second, and will instead be portrayed as a former Black Widow. So why involve her at all? If you're making all these changes and having to water down a character to where they're essentially nothing like what they were, but you still insist on making sure that there's an IDF Zionist war criminal presence in this movie and try to put her alongside Captain America to make it seem like, oh yeah, we're buddies. We love it. Like, Sam Wilson is better than that as a character. He would call that out. African Americans often stand beside Muslims and Palestinians because we know the shared struggle. We know what it's like to suffer and to die and to lose everything. Okay? We know what that's like to be uprooted from your land and displaced somewhere else. We know what that's like. So Sam would know better. He would. He would stand against that. And as would Steve Rogers' Cap. He would see wrong and stand against it. So, though she would no longer be a Mossad agent in this movie, many are concerned as to how this will further harm the misrepresentation of the genocide in Gaza and further antagonization of Palestinian natives. Now, you may have heard this word Mossad, and you may not be familiar, and fair enough if you aren't. I will explain it to you. Mossad is the Israeli version of the CIA and wages war through deception and trickery. Now, like the American Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA will often do bad things. We'll start coups in South American countries. We'll destroy socialist governments. We'll spy and subterfuge and assassinate and all sorts of things. Oftentimes it serves a greater good, and maybe it leans into a nationalist view of America. But Mossad is worse. Mossad would be considered a terrorist group, and I'll explain why. So they manipulate media perception by staging attacks. So, for example, the pager attacks in Lebanon in 2024, where Netanyahu actually awarded Donald Trump a golden pager in remembrance of this terrorist attack that Mossad initiated. The pager attacks from Lebanon in 2024 were an example of how the group uses terrorism to eliminate targets with large amounts of civilian collateral damage, something that Americans typically try to avoid. They loaded over 5,000 pagers with 2 ounces of explosive material next to the lithium-ion battery at the production level. So that means they were in the warehouses doing this. They were able to get in and disrupt it at the manufacturing level and rig them to blow up remotely, causing a lot of civilian death. 2,800 people were injured and 12 dead. The move was praised by some as a James Bond-esque maneuver. But if you know anything about fiction, which clearly people that write characters like Sabra don't understand, that James Bond he doesn't commit terrorism. He doesn't cause civilian death and collateral damage. He's a spy. He kills people, he assassinates people. Sometimes he makes mistakes or does the wrong thing, but he doesn't slaughter people indiscriminately. He doesn't blow up a bunch of civilian mobile devices and pagers and cell phones and everything, right? You have to understand these characters. And when you're trying to manipulate media, it's just so obvious the evil behind it all that Sabra and this just isn't welcome in our culture. It's not helpful. It doesn't change anything. Now, we need to talk about the next thing, because also with Sabra being a superhero and named only a year before the massacre of Sabra and Shatila, there is also Sabra Hummus and the cultural erasure that Israel is responsible for. So not only the fact that they commit a genocide against Palestinians and they make a comic book character to sort of, mimic and fight against Palestinians and personify this character as all good and the brave angel of Israel that stands against the evil Palestinians, even a dead little Arab boy. Like, that's insane. That's like mentally deranged. So, Sabra Hummus and cultural erasure. Sabra Hummus is a rather well-known hummus brand. You may have seen it in your supermarket. But most people do not know it's made in Israel, and it is on the BDS, the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions list, which you can find at bdsmovement.net. I'll have a link in the description. It's on the BDS boycott list, and is masking the name for its other meanings. And, of course, after the Sabra massacre, you look at Sabra Hummus as a Palestinian, and it's mocking you. It's like if we had Auschwitz sauerkraut or something, you would be like, this German group that makes this fucking sauerkraut is mocking Jews. Like, that's messed up, right? Like, so this is another way of not only mocking Palestinians, but the Sabra Hummus company takes that money and uses it to donate and fund the IDF and soldiers and feed them. In the same way McDonald's, Burger King, Starbucks, Intel has provided their processors and computing chips to the Israeli military to go in their bombs and go into their technology that they use to commit genocide. So the only time that things like this end is when you put pressure on these companies. And McDonald's is feeling it. Starbucks is feeling it. Their profits are way down. And Intel closed one of their warehouses in Israel due to the pressure that people put on Intel. So boycotting is real. And you think that you're powerless and that, well, you call your representative, but they're owned by AIPAC. They're Joe Biden, who has $11 million funded by AIPAC, so he's not going to listen to you. Look at the list of representatives, both on the left and right, that are completely owned by AIPAC. You call your representative Ted Cruz, you call John Cornyn, whoever, right? And you find out that they don't care. They don't want to listen to you. So what do? You boycott. You spread videos like this. You spread information and news. You inform people. You rally together. You protest. You bring about the change that you want to see in the world. So it's one of many articles of Israel that mocks Palestinians and claims ownership over native Palestinian heritage, recipes, and history, which helps further the erasure of the Palestinian identity and past. Because there can be no Palestinian people if you start saying, oh, well, hummus is a Jewish thing. It's not an Arab thing. Or they take za'atar even, Z-A-T-A-R, I believe, is the spelling. And it's a spice, similar to oregano. There are even articles online that say, you'll love the Jewish, superfood, za'atar. And it's like, dude, it's an Arabic word, motherfucker. Like, you can't steal our food. Even our food is being taken. Not just our land and our people and killing fucking people over this, but they're trying to take our culture and our food because obviously it's better than their food. But anyway, that's a story for another day. But that is how this Zionism erases Palestinian heritage, our recipes, our history, our food, our people, everything, our culture, what we believe in, who we are. And it harms us. And that's why Sabra is not welcome in any form. In comic books, media, video games, any of it. None of it. Never. There's nothing positive that can be learned from this character. If you wanted to inject this character into a movie, you would have to make her the entire villain of the entire movie, and you would have to deeply explain both sides of the Israel and Palestine genocide that is happening. And you wouldn't have to be shy about it. You would have to show the war crimes and the evil that's happening. You would have to vilify her beyond a villain. We all agree Hitler is evil and that Nazism is not welcome on this planet. Not a single Nazi flag should ever be allowed to fly. Because it's cruel, it's evil, it's humanity at our worst. Sabra is an example of Zionism and how Israelis are showing us the worst of what humanity can do. Killing children, killing pregnant women, destroying land, starving people, walling them in. Yeah, people are going to resist when you do shit like that to them. Yeah, and it's their land, and you're stealing it. And you're trying to hide it, but the whole world sees what you're doing. There's a new evil. There's a new swastika in town, and it's the Star of David, unfortunately. And it's the very symbol emblazoned on Sabra's chest. The genocide of Gaza and the West Bank, we got to talk about it. Ever since the Nakba, or as Nakba is known as the Arabic word for catastrophe, in 1948, Palestinians have been killed, beaten, and driven away from their land. There's been an ongoing apartheid occupation and a furthering genocide expanding beyond the Palestinian borders and into Syria and into Lebanon. And it's been going on for a long time. Nothing started October 7th, 2023. It was a continuance of a big, big problem. Palestinians are displaced due to violence and bombings. Attacks and bombings conducted in Lebanon and Syria were done to clear land to build illegal settlements like the Golan Heights in Syria. It's not recognized by UN international law. No country recognizes that is a part of Israel. It's stolen land that people are just like, well, if we live on it, they can't force us off. And that's the idea. They build settlements around Palestinian villages and cities and towns, and they surround them, and then they terrorize them. And then the IDF doesn't intervene. There's no police force to save you. When you call the police, the IDF show up, or the cops show up and they defend what the IDF is doing, and they help the settlers beat you and burn your farmland and burn the olive trees and kill people and beat them and scare them into fleeing. So that's how they build illegal settlements. And these settlements are being used to further advance the notion of the prophetic right to Palestinian land. It's a derangement of their religion. The UN not recognizing the settlements as being illegal allows for violence and bombings to continue. The violence and erasure of Palestinians continues even now with the ceasefire. It's insensitive of Marvel and the team behind the Captain America movie. It will ruin this perception. It's not the fault of Harrison Ford. It's not the fault of any of these actors. Esposito, it's Anthony Mackie, Giancarlo Esposito. It's not their fault. You know, you can't control everything in the screenplay and the script, and you know, you can't control every creative decision. But you can stand up and you can say, this is wrong. This is unequivocally wrong. Unless we're going to adapt this the right way and Cap is going to take a firm stance against this evil character and destroy this character and show that this is not a character to be idolized, then it doesn't belong. And arguably it just doesn't belong because you're just not going to be able to do that and appeal to a childlike audience, you know, in the way that comic book movies need to appeal to children, teenagers, adults, everyone, right? So it's shameful that Marvel and Disney, who are now on the BDS boycott list, and the team behind the movie would even use a character that is rooted in bloody and genocidal disguise. And it's not even a good disguise. It's very obvious. It's unfortunate that there's a possibility for a great movie where Sam Wilson, you know, fully embraces the role of Captain America and fights against the Red Hulk, and for Harrison Ford to become a part of the MCU, and for Giancarlo Esposito to bring in more characters and more villains and tell another great Cap story. I am a huge fan of Captain America. And it's not just because I'm an American, and a Palestinian American, arguably. It's not just because of the red, white, and blue, and because I love my country. It's because I love what he stands for. He does the right thing no matter what. He represents the best of what America can be and should be. And Sabra doesn't represent the best of what Israel or any country in the world can be. She represents the worst. The Hitlering. She represents the Red Skulls of the world. She's worse. Numerous people were intrigued as Sam Wilson would become the new face of Captain America after Captain America and the Winter Soldier, you know, after that show, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where he steps into the role of Captain America. And he suffers with the doubt and lacking the strength of a super soldier. He learns to embrace the shield and how to wield it, both as a weapon and as a defensive maneuver. And he understands the weight of what Steve Rogers, the weight of the burden that comes with carrying that shield and representing the figure that is Captain America. Because he is a symbol to the world of our better angels. In a world where great demons are standing against figures like Captain America. We need Cap more than ever. We need to appeal to our better angels more than ever. It's exciting where Sam could become the new face of Captain America and take the franchise. But being tone deaf in your choice of adding such divisive and offensive characters will ruin the success of this movie that it could have had otherwise. Read the frickin' room, Marvel. Doubling down on adding the character despite public outcries and negative receptions, even in screenings and testing showings, is a weird, stupid-ass decision. If you'd like to learn more about what is happening in Gaza and Palestine, follow my channel, Aaron Shack Politics. Feel free to comment on the video if you have any additional questions on anything you may have learned during the video. And check out Aaron Shack, my gaming channel, where we talk about gaming. I share my passion and joy for gaming. We play a wide variety of games. I have thousands of videos across the channel. And we love talking about Marvel and DC Comics all the time. And we play all the video games associated with those we can. That has become a key force of the channel. So I appreciate you. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.